When I was 10 years old, my dad died. He was 44. I remember a lot about him. I remember learning to ride my bike.
Huh?
No.
Yeah, if you learn to sit straight on the seat, it won't be as bad.
I'm looking at my phone.
I remember opening lots of presents and having Dad play the song Snoopy and the Red Baron over the phone for Uncle Mike every Christmas morning.
To Mike from Santa.
Really?
Yeah. To Mike from Santa.
Well, who messed that fireplace up?
Santa. Because he came down the chimney.
But mostly, I just remember my dad. I remember a man that loved his wife, loved his kids, loved his friends, and loved his family. Now I'm 24 years old, and I wonder what it would be like to know him now. What was he like when he was my age? What was he like when he was a kid? How did he meet my mom? These are the stories that my dad never got a chance to tell me.
We met in the drama club. I was in a play, and Dad built the scenery. Yeah, we started dating in high school. Never really dated anybody else. My parents didn't let me date or date Dad, for a while either. Grandpap had a painting business, and Dad worked in the painting business since he was, 11 really. But by the time he was in high school, he was pretty good, and it was a really good summer job for him. He sort of wasn't planning on going to college. And I was planning on going to college, so they decided that if he wanted me to marry him, he'd better go to college. So he was sort of late applying, and he started in second semester. And Uncle Mike was already there, and they became good friends.
Met in college, and I know when I first met Ralph, I really didn't like him. Me and I weren't friends. It was only when, after a while, that we, got together, and I don't even know how, but I think we were talking about fraternities, and we both pledged the same fraternity. That's when we became friends.
Whenever Dad insisted he wanted to go to college, they said, "Oh, all right, but you don't have to go to college. We don't want you to go to college." And they paid for the first semester, and then they didn't pay after that. So Dad got a bunch of jobs to pay for college, and one of them was at a power plant called Townsend and Bodum, where he was the night manager.
I went to school all day, and then had classes. Nobody was carrying about 21, 24 credits or whatever, hours, and then he worked all night. Also school, he worked in the post office at school, and on my desk in the room, we used to call your dad Zip, or Zip Code, because that's when he started Zip Code. He was Mr. Zip. And on my lamp on my desk, he signed it Zip.
The job he took after college was with Chrysler Credit.
He was a collector, and sometimes we'd go over to people's houses, and he'd go up to an apartment, and Ralph would knock on the door, and he'd start pounding on the door, and people would start swearing at him, and tell him to open the door, But once the people seemed to open the door, and he got in, no one gave you a really bad time.
That's how he went to pianos and stuff. Ralph went in to check the floor plan. After he'd been doing this for about a year, I was pregnant, and they were moving. The Chrysler Credit was moving to New York. But I was still in school, and Dad didn't want to move to New York, so he didn't move to New York. He had to look for another job. It was like, oh my God, he lost his job. I'm pregnant. How are we going to do this? Pianos and stuff asked him if he wanted to invest in the business. So he invested in the business, and I think bought one share of stock out of 3. And he was a business major who didn't play any musical instruments, and they were both musicians. I had the feeling that they were just taking Dad's $3,000 and, you know, because they were desperate and they were going to lose it. For the first year, we wrote out our paychecks and didn't cash them. When Mike was born, we were still living with Grandma. We couldn't really afford Mike when we had him. We lived pretty cheap. But it was fun. I mean, it gave you a reason for living, you know? It was like my job. You go out and you buy pot roast for 30 cents a pound. You know? You're doing your job right. When Mike was around 6, the store was doing better and we could cash our checks and all that, but we still weren't sure that it was going to make it. There were a few years where it could have gone either way. And there were a few years when I was certain it was going to go belly up.
Even when the store wasn't doing well, Ralph always liked to celebrate Christmas a lot. Your dad loved to go to the beach. Your dad loved to eat too, you know.
The store moved to Blocks and they bought out barbecue. Then it started to be successful on a different level. So we thought, oh, well, you know, maybe we'll just have one kid because 6 years is such a big gap. So then we ended up having kids with an 11-year gap.
I started 15 and a half or something, started working in the summers, and when they'd have special events like some artist here or something like that. So it was sort of financially driven that if you wanted to drive, you'd have to come help out at the store a little bit. Still, I got to know him as the daytime working here. You know, I still hear stories. I don't know a whole lot of them, but when you talk about memories of Dad, that's one of the things. He always had a pen behind his ear when he was at the store. I do too. It's really convenient. It's where else are you going to put it?
He worked a lot always, you know, and he'd have the long hours at the store, and in the evenings he'd play. I remember the first time we went to see him, it was he played the drum, and he was like self-taught, you know.
At the store, he got tired of saying he didn't play an instrument whenever people asked him what instrument he played, so he took drum lessons. And after about a year, he was asked to be the drummer in a band.
The first place we went to see him was the Duquesne Club in Duquesne, which it wasn't a very nice place.
And I guess he wasn't the best drummer in the world, but he was pretty good at keeping a beat, and he didn't get fancy.
And Ralph said, you don't care what they do. He said, as long as they don't have to play any polkas. And they had a polka marathon there or something. And Ralph was playing polkas, yeah.
He went to Dr. John, and Dr. John said, there's a spot on your lung, we got to check it out. And that he thought it was cancer.
It took some time to build up. I had an idea. He never told anybody here at the store either. But I had an idea that something wasn't right, and I didn't know what was wrong.
Whenever he went to the one doctor, I guess the one who would do a biopsy or something, that doctor said he had the lungs of a non-smoker. And Dad thought that meant he didn't have lung cancer.
I guess I just never really thought in that direction. I just assumed he was getting older and just wasn't getting around as well or whatever.
And then he went into the hospital and they did the bronchoscopy, and that came up that he had the bronchial tubes of a non-smoker. But the spot was still there and the spot was growing, so they decided it was lung cancer.
Being here at the store, I think I saw him sleeping at the desk one day, and that was when nobody seemed to be bothered by that. That was when I realized something was really wrong.
Said he had the radiation, he had the chemotherapy, but they didn't think it had shrunk enough for that to happen. So the doctor basically said, you know, he's not going to be one of the ones who's going to make it. Dad didn't believe that. And he didn't want to tell anybody because he didn't want to be treated differently.
Right before I left for school, I said, Mom, what's going on? You know, what's the deal? And then she told me, but it wasn't, I don't know why they waited so long.
He wanted to have his real life and be treated like his real self, not to be treated like somebody who was dying of cancer.
I think there was probably at least a year or two that nobody had any idea.
And how do you tell a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old?
And maybe he was trying to fool himself too that he was able to keep going and keep doing everything that he always did.
He went to work every day. And
I knew for about a year and a half of that time. But yeah, nobody said anything.
He was a person who made you glad to be with him, and that didn't change. So that it usually ended up, instead of me raising his spirits, he usually had to raise mine.
It was Christmas that year. We always had the 2 trees. We always do things in the basement because there was more room. Everything was set up upstairs. And asked why, it was because Dad couldn't get downstairs. He couldn't leave the living room too well. At that point, he pretty much wasn't going to work. He was pretty much at home all the time.
I'm sure everybody knew he wasn't doing too well. I don't know if they were thinking this is the last time they'd see him, but they enjoyed themselves anyway. And that's just because that was the way he was. You know, whenever you were with him, he tried to, I don't even think he even tried. He made it as fun as possible, no matter what was going on.
Christmas morning he called, but very early. He wouldn't talk, he just played a song. He wouldn't talk until the song was over. And then, like the last year before he died, he said that. He said, I'm not going to be able to call you.
I don't know if you know that I went back to Dad's casket and put a pen behind his ear before they buried him because I just thought that was appropriate. I had to ask a couple people to make sure that wasn't a problem, but that's how everybody knew him. You know, that's the vision everybody had, and I didn't think it was out of line. So I went back and made sure that happened.
The Baron made Snoopy fly to the Rhine and forced him to land behind the enemy lines. Snoopy was certain that this was the end when the Baron cried out, "Merry Christmas, my friend!"